It's that period when the state is persuaded to invest tax dollars in building these places.
But while those who ran the institutions were getting rich, psychiatrists yet lacked the credibility to maximize their cash flow.
In order to justify their profession, they needed to come up with these biological solutions, or they didn't have any profession. The only way for them to solve that was to attempt to start believing that these people that were suffering from emotional disorders was from a biological basis.
Whatever was done to make this person more manageable would be simply called a treatment. And the sad reality is that many of these so-called treatments were, in essence, torture.
The near-drowning devices that were developed in this period, for example, must have been appallingly frightening. For example, one device involved putting the patient into a coffin, closing the lid, and dumping it into a bath of water, and then opening it up and trying to revive the patient. There were a range of these things, and the mortality rate was very, very high.
Psychiatrists next sought to give credence to their practices by cloaking them in the language of medicine. This repackaging of treatment became known as the medical model.
Somebody who's really hyper and manic, if you're wrapped up in a cold sheet and dunked into some water, you're going to quit acting manic because that's a punishing treatment. But as soon as the symptoms started to go away, they started to believe that somehow by wrapping them up and dunking them in cold water, it was draining the toxics out of their body. So they built the medical model around that.
Pushing the biological theory of mental illness a step further, an American, Benjamin Rush, put forth the idea that insanity was caused by too much blood in the head. The cure? Remove the blood by any means possible. Restraint, cold water, bleeding, even terror. And with that, a new medical model was created.
Benjamin Rush was probably the most famous American physician of the Revolutionary era. Rush was known as the master bleeder. He bled his patients for madness. He also invented something called the tranquilizer. It's a chair that looks a little bit like an electric chair. The patient was confined in this apparatus, sometimes with cold water applied to his or her head, for some hours at a time, and Rush announces in a letter that he's invented this new contraption and dubbed it the tranquilizer.
Rush's often lethal procedures were detailed in his 1812 textbook, which remained psychiatry's authoritative source for the next 70 years. He was so revered that in 1965, Rush was enshrined as the father of American psychiatry on the seal of the American Psychiatric Association. As the 1800s wore on, psychiatry's mounting failures at curing madness threatened their financial bottom line, forcing them to invent new medical models.
The cures promised were not delivered. So by the 1860s and 70s, a growing mood of pessimism was covering Europe and North America, that effectively the new institutions were ever growing in size, but not growing in their effectiveness.
The 20th century brought more medical models. American psychiatrist Henry Cotton mutilated his patients by removing their body parts, declaring this a breakthrough in the treatment of mental illness.
The earliest target was the teeth and then the tonsils and the sinuses. But when patients didn't get better, the enthusiasts for this treatment then started to move down the body and to say, well, obviously patients have swallowed bacteria in their saliva, so stomachs need to go, spleens need to go, colons need to go.
As public outcry escalated over torture and maiming of patients, psychiatrists would invent new methods, each one hailed as the miracle cure. But each one was ultimately proven no more effective nor less brutal than the last.
This is a history of psychiatry, more or less, to damage the patient. I mean, this is a version of the original model, which was to chain them like animals.
If you're doing it to somebody because you insist that they have to change, and you're going to do that by turning the screws, you might say, whether it's with medication, restraint, whatever, that's torture. And a huge part of what psychiatry has done really comes down to torture.
As the 20th century progressed, psychiatry would continue to seek legitimacy by transforming itself into a medical discipline. But they succeeded only in creating more efficient ways of inflicting mental and physical torture and death. A legacy that has carried forward into modern psychiatry, with its most profitable medical model to date, the mass drugging of millions. But to do this, psychiatrists first had to shatter one of mankind's most cherished beliefs, decreeing that people were not what they thought they were.
Okay, I'm a psychiatrist.
Yeah. I'm going to let you talk. Shit.
I'm going to move over a little bit
Yeah,
to the
we're going to
opposite
step
direction.
to the side and let you deal with that.
No, I agree with a lot of that, so that's why I'm pausing, and I'm a psychiatrist. There's a book called The Moral Treatment of American Psychiatry, and it's out of print, but you should check it out if you can get it. It's by a guy named Backover, and I actually read it in my training, which was in the 1970s. And what's interesting is what happened is around the time of the Civil War, there was a bunch of very humane psychiatrists who, instead of treating patients by locking them up, they had these patients live with them in the psychiatrist's home, and they do farming. They treat them like people, and the recovery rate was pretty high. Mm-hmm. And then what happened is the American thing is, well, if a rule's good, let's make it bigger. And so they started to increase the size of those, mm-hmm. and they increased them into institutions, and they increased them into big mental hospitals. And then what happened is they kind of dehumanized it. And when they dehumanized it, but if you read this, you'll say, why aren't we doing this now? Mm-hmm. And I think the challenge right now is it required a kind of patience, that people don't have. People are very impatient now. Mm-hmm. And I think if you rush someone who doesn't have a psychiatric disorder but is a little bit slower than you in the way they think, you're going to get irritable with them. You're going to jump down their throat. Mm-hmm. And so there's actually an organization that I'm promoting everywhere called the Life Adjustment Team, lifeadjustmentteam.com. Mm-hmm. And I'm promoting it because what they have is case managers who work with people where they live. Mm-hmm. So they don't have offices. They go out and meet psychiatric, drug, and alcohol people who relapse greatly, and they form a teaching, mentoring, coaching, kind of a loving bond. Mm-hmm. And they have decreased relapse by 90%. Wow. And so nobody knows about this.
Is there a website?
lifeadjustmentteam.com. Mm-hmm. And actually the founder, Pete Lynette, Linnett, he was on Good Day LA talking about the need to treat people where they live, as opposed to having them come to your office for an hour and maybe you have a good conversation, but then they get triggered by a text message or whatever. Right. So the idea is spend up to 9 hours a week with them, and they can internalize that, whereas once a week for an hour, or if you're seeing a psychiatrist for meds, once a month for 20 minutes. It's crazy.
It's crazy, yeah. Listen, April Davis on the line. Can you tell our fans where they can find you and support your work? You have a website or something like that? April?
Oh, sorry. Yes, yes. It's cupidscronies.com, cupidscronies.com.
Let me just say, there it is up there on the website. We see it, cupidscronies.com. Let me just say, we really appreciate all of your information, your insight, your passion. You're a very, very great guest and beautiful and all of that. We might have to have you back sometime soon. Are you down for that?
Of course. I was just going to say I agree with what he was saying, because when you go to somebody's home and you're helping them, it's just they're going to be so much more open to it than if you take them out of their comfort zone and put them into a facility or put them into an office, with white walls. It's just so much more intimidating. So I think that this life adjustment team, that sounds amazing what they're doing.
Wow. Well, thank you. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
All righty. Ladies and gentlemen, So What Mornings in the building. This is a very interesting topic. Narcissism. Would people ever call you a narcissist, Bobby? Has it ever happened?
I've been called worse than that. And during the break, we were having a discussion, Brandon and I was sharing with her a few years ago. actually many years ago, I was living in Louisville, Kentucky, finding my way. And this lady that I work with, she pulled me to the side and she said, you have a lot of problem with women, don't you? Because they perceive you as someone who thinks too much of themselves. I said, look, I had a good-looking mama. And my daddy must have been decent-looking, too. So I don't know why people want me to act like I'm an ugly guy, you know.
Wow.
And she said, it's not just that. It's just how you wear that.
Yeah.
It can be overwhelming to people, that kind of thing. And now she told me that she went even deeper than that. She said, don't spend no time in the mirror if you're in the company of a woman. I said, I don't. She said, well, you got another vibe that's causing that perception that you think too much of yourself. So, no, I'm not narcissistic, but it's in the ballpark.
There it is. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll be back. More questions, more guests. It's crazy. Narcissism. Let me clear my throat. We'll be back.
Hey, who's that begging on that song right there?
It's the homie Paris.
Oh,
Wow.
Yeah, it's all good. We'll be back.
Pathological narcissism is a ubiquitous phenomenon because every human being, regardless of the nature of his society and culture, develops healthy narcissism early in life. Healthy narcissism is rendered pathological by abuse, and abuse, alas, is a universal human behavior. By abuse, we mean any refusal to acknowledge the emerging boundaries of the individual. Smothering, doting, and excessive expectations are as abusive as beating and incest. With 7 billion humans on the planet, the need to assert oneself, to be noticed, to be recognized as unique, is ever more pressing. No one likes to feel like a cog in a machine, an atom in an organism, or a speck among billions. Consumerism and mass communication that lead to global cultural and societal homogeneity foster the same narcissistic reactions and provoke the same narcissistic defenses in whole collectives as they do in individuals.
Wow.
Yeah, somebody needs to give me an interpretation.
Yeah, I was going to say, what
I
exactly
understood
was he
every
saying?
word.
All right. Well,
Break it down.
Well, you guys hear any Ebonics? What is that? He was very clear. Said everybody has an innate, there's 7 billion people on the planet, everybody has an innate desire to want to assert themselves. He said nobody wants to just be a cog in the machine or an atom in the organism. People want to be the organism. They want to be the movement. And it seems to be natural to have a natural, narcissistic, selfish kind of drive on the inside. And April Davis mentioned that earlier. Again, for the listeners, people want to know what that book is you mentioned. Somebody hit me and said, could you tell them the name of the book?
It's called The Moral, M-O-R-A-L, Treatment in American Psychiatry by J.S. Bockoven, B-O-C-K-H-O-V-E-N. I emailed it to you.
Excellent. Now, let me just say this really quickly, and then over to Bobby, and then we have a guest on the line that's listening right now. Is Jay-Z the most narcissistic rapper ever? Is rap itself? What about Kanye? What about the genre of rap music? I mean, it's been braggadocio since the very beginning. It's been aggrandizing of accomplishments. It's been, I'm the greatest ever. I mean, is that really a bad thing? Some people say Kanye is the most arrogant, narcissistic MC of all times. Bobby?
I think generationally, that has become something of a phenomenon because when Ali was raising his hand and saying, I'm the greatest, he had already proved that he was the greatest. He stepped in the ring and told him, I'm going to beat Sonny Liston for the world championship. And he felt that way before he did it, and he went out and proved it. Now, you can be packaged as all of that without any substance whatsoever.
Good point.
And I have a problem with that, but in terms of defining why people are motivated to do certain things, I honestly have seen in my lifetime people overlook or not admit that they listen to the following station 24/7, WIIFM. What's in it for me?
WII.
We stay on that station all the time. And when we're in the presence of people who ignore that, we go right back to that station. What's in it for me? You done told me about you and all of your accomplishments and everything, but I'm over here listening to WIIFM.
There was a word in what you said, ignore, and sometimes because people are preoccupied with something that's on their mind, and they may not be self-centered, they're just preoccupied. Sometimes when they don't notice you, it doesn't mean they are ignoring you, but I think a lot of people personalize it. It's like, well, you're not noticing me, you're not listening to me. Well, I'm sorry, I got a kid in the hospital, I could be dying, I have other things on my mind. No, you are ignoring me. And I think people are too quick and oversensitive, that if you're not tuning into me right now when I want it, you're ignoring me, and that justifies my coming after you. And I think we've become really oversensitive to this.